This is episode 21 of the ThinkData Podcast in partnership with Dataworks, and it's my pleasure to welcome Jay Sarmaz to the show. Jay is the CEO and co-founder at Truve. Truve is an AI-powered legal analytics platform for law firms, and their platform helps those firms understand performance, whilst at the same time helping to drive efficiencies across all parts of the business. Welcome to the show, Jay. And I really appreciate you, taking the time today to talk. And what will be really interesting for those that are listening is for you to really bring to life, firstly, who you are, what brought you to the US, and then ultimately, what took you to launching Truve.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me. First of all,
Pleasure.
Absolutely happy to go back to my background a little bit. So I'm an industrial and systems engineer, Alex. So I've actually started playing with computers at a really early age, probably 11, 12 is when I first started putting together computers and, really trying to understand how and what makes it work the way it works and what are the possibilities and potential. So that's what kind of made me get into the engineering school and got into, again, the industrial and systems engineering, which is actually also called operations research. So the operations research teaches you how to maximize value with limited resources. So any problem that you take, any big problem, take that big problem, break it into smaller problems and try to solve the smaller problems to eventually solve the big problems, knowing that you have limitations. So I've been always fascinated about that thought process. You're not just like trying to solve a problem, you're trying to solve a problem within limitations and resource limitations. Towards the end of my college years, I got into a little bit deeper into large scale optimization models. So got into started doing research on my third and fourth year at the college, which actually eventually then got me into the PhD program at Georgia Tech.
Wow, okay.
So immediately after undergrad, I came to Georgia Tech, started doing research again between the business school this time and the industrial and systems engineering. Now it was kind of time to tie everything that I've learned from engineering school to business. So that's when I started working on real life applied applications of machine learning and data science. Then I've got into the PhD program. After 2.5 years, I was like, let me actually go into the industry a little bit and work my way through it. So immediately started working at a company here in Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, and I really loved kind of implementing and taking all of my knowledge into the industry. So that's how I kind of got into the real world challenges of data and AI and started working on a lot of really big, large scale data science and AI problems. So kind of a quick background, but happy to dive into more details.
Interesting. And I know, obviously, you did the PhD, you obviously then went into industry. At what point was that kind of, that budding entrepreneur kind of shoulder tapped on? At what point do you think, hang on a minute, there's an opportunity for me to find my own business and actually launch something?
It's actually a little bit interesting because so in PhD, you're trying to solve this one very, very specific problem. And you're trying to make this like tiny little bit of an improvement on that one problem. And you work on it for a long time. So it's like it gives you, like you have to have the grit to stand and work on the same problem again and again. And I think that was from a personality perspective that helped me significantly because it keeps me working on problems that other people would just like stop working on. And what ended up happening is I took about 3 months from PhD, and I was like, I'm just gonna go work for a company as an intern. And when I started interning, what I've realized is actually I didn't need to go in that amount of detail. The real life problems don't require you to be like 99.9% accurate. Like if you're over 70, 80% accuracy, now you can actually bring things to life a lot faster. So then I was able to turn problems into solutions very, very quickly, which gave me this, I guess, what people now might call like instant gratification. It wasn't as instant as, like swiping through your Instagram feed, but that's actually what made me like really happy. I was like, oh my God, I can actually solve these problems a lot faster, and I can solve a lot more problems than just, just one problem that would take 5 years in a PhD program. So yeah, I started loving it, and kept working on new problems and new projects, and it just kept coming.
Yeah, interesting. And when was the idea for Truve conceived? And I know you've only gone to look online at the moment. There's so many different AI organizations, Gen AI, normal classic AI startups springing up everywhere. But what ultimately made you think legal analytics, legal kind of AI powered platform as a service was the way to go?
So that kind of goes back to my, I guess, the time that I met my co-founder, Zach. So I met him at my first job. I met Zach, and actually he had a company, and we were trying to kind of like hire him to do one little task for us at that point. So that's how I got to know him. So I've known him for over 10 years. And about 6-7 years ago, we were like, let's actually create a data science consulting company. So
Okay.
we created this one data science consulting company called Scylla Data. And the idea, so when we sat down with Zach, we were like, let's actually think about all the industries that are not using their data as much as they should. And let's just create a list. Like, let's just get a comprehensive list of all industries. And then like, let's find the ones that are least using their data to drive insights and actions. And at the top of the list, there was doctors and lawyers. Then we had like these other 4 or 5 additional industries like real estate companies, distribution companies, furniture companies, healthcare labs, etc. So we've created this list, and we are like, all right, let's actually focus on the top 5. So we started going after those industries and companies that are specifically in those industries in our region. Then eventually, once we started working with lawyers, we started getting a lot more demand. We got 1, and then 1 became 3 became 5. It's just word of mouth. We would just go into these law firms and just pull their data, analyze their data, and kind of provide insights and feedback to them. Things like, oh, you're not profitable on this one case type. We think you should drop it. It's almost the traditional data analytics consulting for law firms. That's how we started. And then eventually we just had so much demand that we were like, we can't handle it anymore. We have to grow the team. And at one point, Alex, what we've done is like, we've seen a common problem between all of these law firms. So I'll go a little bit in detail over here, and please stop me if you have any questions. So the types of law firms that we are working with are plaintiff law firms. So the plaintiff law firms fight against the insurance companies, which are backed by defense law firms. So if you think about it, you have about 75,000 plaintiff law firms in the US, mainly like doing personal injury. And then you have about 7 to 10 really large insurance companies. And those 7 to 10 insurance companies are represented by defense law firms. So it's basically the whole PI or personal injury field is a battle between these two parties. But when you have 7 to 10 really large insurance companies, they have so much data aggregated under that one, under those 7 to 10 companies compared to these 75,000 law firms. It is, they have so much power and understanding of the data. They know exactly how much they can push an individual attorney. They know how much the value of a case they can actually push down. And they built a model called Colossus back in 80s. And that's what they used to push down the values of cases for these plaintiff injury law firms. So as a data scientist, I felt the responsibility to create a technology that actually fights against these insurance companies and these defense law firms. So that's when I've started working on the first version of Case Value Estimator, which estimates the settlement values of personal injury cases. for plaintiff law firms that fights against the colossus technology that insurance companies created. But then the challenge became, how do you bring all of these law firms under one platform to use that intelligence? And that's kind of the first crumbles of Truve coming to life, the case value estimator, and then eventually creating a centralized data and AI platform for law firms.
Interesting. What a journey. And I think, a lot of this all hangs on the idea, but equally the execution, and obviously you being very strong technically, and the hands-on element obviously helped you here. I know you met your founder or your co-founder 10 years ago, and that's kind of how this was born, obviously off the back of the consulting business, identifying the needs, and then building effectively a business. But what steps did you take to then, you mentioned just there, it was like, I then suddenly realized, hang on a minute, we've got a business here. We've got so much work, we need to scale it. What steps do you take to kind of establish almost like the founding team, or like the original, I suppose, the first cohort of staff, and then ultimately launch and scale that product? Because obviously it was just you and your co-founder leading everything. How did you go about kind of establishing that founding team and then actually looking at commercializing this product?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, everything for me, Alex, is iteration and grit. So that's kind of one piece, like, you take that one problem and you keep working on it, make smaller improvements every single time. It is really, really important. I even say, if I can build a solution that's better than the flip of a coin, right? Like, if it is better than that, that's a good start. Let's start with like 51%. And then when it's about 70% accurate, then it's probably time to get out with that product, deploy that product, and start selling it. And then, then the problem is like going from 70% to 99%, understanding what is going to contribute the most to the improvement of that solution. So that's kind of the thought process of commercializing a product. But from a founding team perspective, so entrepreneurship is really hard. People think that, people think about these success stories of people going from zero to $1 billion in like 2 years, 3 years, and having these like crazy lives and whatnot. That is just like probably 0.0001% of all the entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
When you
it's
get
not blue
into
sky and rainbows, is it? I think everyone thinks you're on this ivory tower and everything. It's literally the easiest job in the world. But I think your point's really, really valid there.
Absolutely. And a lot of people also, what they don't realize is entrepreneurship is a 10-year, at least a 10-year journey. So you're in it. And once you have that mindset, when you talk to people, it is actually not that hard to understand if somebody has that entrepreneurial spirit. Somebody wants to do something like significant or something extraordinary, and have that mindset. And so like we pull, so entrepreneurs pull other entrepreneurs. We've spoken with a lot of people. We've probably spoken over 1,000 people over the last 2 years for our founding team. And obviously you try to select the ones that has that mindset and that has that growth and entrepreneurship mindset to go with. So that's how we went. And we also know everybody that we have on our team wants to do something at some point themselves too, right? Like they want to be entrepreneurs too. So now within Truve, we're trying to convert a part of our operation into almost like an incubator. So we want to actually have our team members come up with ideas, present them, and then in return, we want to be able to fund them, and we want to be able to give them the resources that we already have within our team to bring those ideas to life. So it's that kind of a setup that that we think is gonna work and attract kind of the biggest entrepreneurs out there.
Yeah. It's striking that fine balance though, isn't it? Because obviously you want them to come and ultimately focus on scaling Truve and getting this business, to where you ultimately want to get it to, but then obviously giving them enough opportunity to hone their natural entrepreneurialism, I guess. So it's that's a really interesting concept. And I know obviously, you've obviously met your co-founder. There's a lot of kind of budding founders who listen to this. They're either in industry or they're looking to transition, or they are a founder and maybe going through those pain points that you ultimately went through yourself. But in terms of hiring and growing, we are in a unusual space at the moment. Companies want to hire. The cost of money is more expensive. Talent is still quite scarce. But how did you establish those kind of values and those kind of principles that you ultimately could hire against? Because in the early days, it's gut feel, it's passion. As you say, you're meeting your co-founder and you're both bought into that journey. But when you're looking to bring that second layer in, what steps did you take to really look at those values and principles that ultimately you could hire against and also review their performance against?
And that, Alex, that's a great question, just in general. And I think hiring is the hardest part of being an entrepreneur or building a startup, because the team at the end of the day, makes ideas come to life. Even if there is 5% chance that an idea is going to make it, that 5% depends on the team that you have. So if you don't have the right people, you're not gonna make that happen. So the team is absolutely the number one piece, I think, for a startup. So in terms of values, I've actually we had an annual company meeting a few months ago, and before that, for a few months, we were trying to sit down and write about our values. Like, what are our values? Like, how, what kind of people are we looking for, et cetera, et cetera. And every time we tried to do that, it actually did not work. It did not feel. It felt very artificial instead of natural. And if something is not feeling natural, just in general, that just means that there's something that is not right. So
is that because ultimately you felt like you were forcing we must come up with some values and vision because that's what everyone else does? Or is it equally just you weren't sure the values you were coming up with really meant anything? Because I know companies, they can pay lots of money for these companies to come in and give them their whiteboards and their values, and off they go. And most companies never follow them. Which one was it?
So it's like, so when you write down something and say, hey, these are our values, it actually, if you're not really feeling it, it doesn't just happen.
Yeah.
Having something on the wall that just says, all right, here are the 5-6 values that we have, doesn't just work. So instead of that, what we said is, all right, let's think about the script in a different way. What are the values that we have in common for our team right now? Let's just think about the values. Let's just think about the way we interact on a day-to-day basis with our team, with our clients, and everyone. And inherently, when you add more people to your team, you're adding them because there's a cultural or a value fit. And then when you come together, those values get stronger. You may be getting like other people that have different values that are more valuable. And like now your other team members are getting used to it too. So eventually, I guess what I'm trying to go with this is what we found is values are coming from your team and they establish over time. That's why every person that you add to your team is really, really important, because they're going to bring some good values to the table, and other people are going to learn from it, and it's going to actually allow your team to evolve over time too. So then we are like, all right, let's actually think about all the values that we have so far. And that actually resonated really well with the people. So I'll just give one of the examples, Alex. So one of the values that we have is being borderless. So we as a team, we at some point had people from 7 different countries on our team.
Wow.
But it didn't matter where you were in the world. Everybody was like super connected and, interacting well. And people were genuinely curious about their team members and friends and whatnot. So being borderless was one of our values. And
I like that.
I wouldn't just we wouldn't just sit down and just like say, oh, like we'll be borderless. That's one of our values. And that's just not a thing, I guess.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think companies do follow a kind of a natural path, and I think as companies grow, you cannot you can control culture to a certain degree, but equally the people you hire, certainly in the early stages, they're ultimately what will make your company. Because I think
Absolutely.
the best leaders are the ones that are empowering those people to step up and actually, have a voice and actually influence that kind of product and drive that performance from a high level. So yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting take on, as I mentioned earlier, can be a very complicated and drawn out process and quite contrived at points as well. But it sounds like you just quite simplified it, and I'm guessing people are more bought into that now as well.
Absolutely, absolutely,
Mm.
and also like there's some new values that emerge as well that are growing over time too.
Yeah,
It's just amazing to see. And I'll say one final thing also, when you like, one of the reasons I think teams do not um, accept a new hire is if that new hire is not a good fit, not just from a culture perspective, but from values perspective. I
yeah,
think values come before the culture. If the values do not align, then you'll very quickly understand that that person is not going to fit on the team. So,
yeah,
um, yeah, we've seen that happen as well. Like we have had a few hires, and uh, very quickly we just realized that the values are just not aligned, and the company is almost like a body. The body is not going to accept
yeah.
if there's not a fit. So yeah, that was also the case.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, I really like that. And I know you relatively early on in the journey, you mentioned earlier about kind of the 10-year commitment, which entrepreneurs really need to have in the back of their mind. But there's a lot of people listening to this who, as I mentioned, are budding founders, are kind of future entrepreneurs. But when you were on that journey of conceiving and launching a business, what do you think is the biggest thing you learned on that, and what could you impart on other entrepreneurs in terms of what maybe they should do, or equally what they shouldn't do when looking to launch?
Um, yeah, so I think let me try to answer this question like in a few different ways. So number one thing is so if you go to any industry and just talk to, let's say, 10 to 20 companies in that industry, just take them out to lunch and just ask them what their problems are. With not a whole lot of companies, which is 10, 20, you're going to start seeing some patterns in terms of the problems that they're having. And you can then list those problems, and then you can start doing research, right? Like you can look at, are there companies that are actually attacking those problems and solving those problems, or trying to solve those problems, or just going through the list and finding out what is really doable. So I'm trying to talk about the ideation, finding an
Yeah.
idea stage. So then you'll very quickly understand if you have a problem that you can attack. So then once you have the idea, it's again become all about iteration and consistency. So start with that 51%
Yeah.
and start going after that big solution eventually. Um, but obviously, going back to the operations research comment I made earlier,
Mm.
so one of the key, um, I guess, key characteristics of an entrepreneur is understanding your, kind of resource limitations and what you can do with your limited resources. So that's always important. So think about your deliverables and timelines, and then kind of come back from that and see what you can do with your existing resources. So having that limited resources mentality changes a lot of things. So I would definitely focus on that.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, just um, keep working on it. You'll be surprised what you can do when
Yeah.
you keep working on the same problem for a long time. Um,
Yeah. It goes back to your PhD mindset, I think, isn't it? Of those fine tuning that kind of just fine tuning certain elements of it in a business really has do that enough. I think the impact can be really, really big. And equally surround yourself with great people. And hire people that really challenge that as well and challenge the status quo every day. I think I think it's a fascinating insight. And I know you obviously are a startup founder. You've obviously, you mentioned earlier, you spoke to lots and lots of other founders, lots of other startups in your space and equally in other spaces. But now you can sit back. What do you think is the difference between a great startup versus an average one?
Wow. Yeah. So that's a really, really big question, Alex. And so to make a really great startup, a lot of things need to come together. So there's a lot of things that need to be right to be a great startup, and everything else is what makes it what makes an average startup. So that's kind of the starting point. I would say number one thing is obviously the team. So the team is really important. Obviously you need to have you need to have the right idea and whatnot, but the team is the number one. Leaders who understand again resources and what can be done in a limited when you have limited resources. The vision of the founders. If the culture is promoting innovation and learning, and finally the agility and the adaptability of the team to changes, because what you start with is usually is actually never what you end up with. So we have made so many changes along the way that the agility the agility mindset is really important. So I would say people is number one. The idea, the industry is number two. Probably timing is number three. So you can work on the same problems, and the timing may not be right. And like a funny story, actually, my father-in-law has worked on neural networks back in 80s and 90s.
Okay, wow.
So he was like one of the earlier researchers or professors in computer science working on neural networks. And we have a lot of these conversations with him like all the time. And he's like, like all this stuff you worked on like 20, 30 years ago, but then there were not enough resources. Like there was not machines that were that strong as we have today. And that was why just that research ended at that point. And then now 20 years forward, now you have all the resources and can use all of that. So that's why like timing is really important. I think they worked on the right things 20, 30 years ago, but the implementations they're just now seeing it. So timing is really important. And maybe one final piece I think is luck. So you need to maybe spraying of luck at the end too. So sometimes you may be at the right place at the right time, and everything might come together.
Yeah, I think it's the those four things are kind of really that secret recipe. Get those right. It's interesting you touched on people right at the beginning, because I think a lot of people overlook that. A lot of founders overlook that point, and they, it's their vision, their business, their baby, and ultimately, in some cases, their kind of ego that leads to the company failing. And actually you should bring in those great people around you and never settle. I think that's the mindset for people, is never settle and keep pushing on. And it's interesting, your father-in-law was kind of working on these use cases, as you said, 20, 30 years ago, but there was no real appetite or desire to need them right now. But we're kind of obviously front and center. AI is everywhere. ChatGPT, we're talking companies being launched all over the place. But if you look over the next kind of 6 to 12 months, what do you think we can expect to see in this space in terms of whether it's kind of outside of pure kind of legal AI and legal analytics, but actually more broader? What do you think's next for us?
Yeah, I'm sure like you've heard the big investment in this one company called Inflection AI, 1.3 billion. So right now there's a big race in terms of building the next personal assistant, AI assistant.
Yep.
And that's definitely going to be the next big thing. And the reason the investment is that heavy is because you need a lot of computing power, which companies do not want to wait for a quantum computer. As you know, quantum computing is also the next big, one of the next big things. So they're like, we don't want to wait until the quantum computers are here. We have to have this one giant machine that can actually learn everything and anything and everything that ever existed pretty much, and on the web. So that's absolutely going to be the number one item, personal assistant. I would also say, just in general, AI is, you might have heard this, but AI is like electricity. So now everything is going to be like powered with AI. I think every single piece, our cars and phones are already, AI powered now, but like everything that we do, our houses, food and this and that, everything is going to be pretty much AI powered. So it's going to exponentially grow the value of everything that we do. So I think the economies are going to grow significantly faster, and we'll see more and more AI applications.
Yeah, I think you're completely right, and I think what we're probably also seeing now is companies being created now that may be the next kind of Facebook, Amazon. We just don't know, but actually, I think the acceleration of those companies because of AI is going to be far quicker than what we saw with Facebook in 2004. So now, probably the biggest, fastest growing tech company really changed the way the internet was used. I think what you're going to see with AI now is companies being conceived, and that rate of growth is going to be far quicker, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the time to value is definitely a lot faster. And like we're also trying to like release some Gen AI based products too.
Yeah,
We've
interesting.
been working on it for about a year now. So we've been working on some applications as well.
Interesting. And we can expect people can expect to see those being released in what? Have you got a roadmap in place for that?
Yeah, there's already one that actually is being released this week.
Amazing.
Specifically in the mass torts phase, mass torts practice area.
Yep.
And then there's another one that's going to be released later this month. That's going to be for personal injury. So we've already been working on some use cases for legal.
Fantastic. Well, I think with that in mind, I think it's a great way to end. And thanks so much for just talking through. I'll talk for hours. I think there's a huge amount people can take from this. I think there's the insight, the entrepreneur journey, conceiving a product, launching a product, and actually going back to those kind of people and those 4 points you talked about. What makes a good product and a good startup ultimately is going to be really well received. So thanks, Joe. I do appreciate your time. It sounds obviously with the release this week and obviously something later this month, you're pretty busy. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Alex. It was a great conversation, and look forward to hearing from the people.
Thanks, Jay. Appreciate it.